Ladies and gentlemen, we now officially open the seminar, Building Infrastructure Driving Growth, Public-Private Partnership as a Catalyst for Transformation. The seminar is convened by the Public-Private Partnership Center and the Philippine Constructors Association. It is part of the host country initiatives in conjunction with the Philippine hosting of the 45th Annual Meeting of the Board of Governors of the Asian Development Bank. May we request everyone to rise for the Philippine National Anthem.
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisiin. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng luwalhati't pagsinta, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please be seated. May we call on the Executive Director of the Public-Private Partnership Center, Ms. Cosette V. Canilao, for the welcome address.
Secretary Cayetano Paderanga, Secretary Singson, distinguished panelists, honored guests, our partners from the private sector, colleagues in government, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, please allow me to welcome our esteemed delegates to the Asian Development Bank Board of Governors meeting. This will be the 14th Contractors Association, is staging its first ever international conference and exhibit under the Philippine Corporate and Investment Pavilion. As our theme suggests, this entire conference and exhibit narrates the journey of the PPP program in the Philippines and the stages it went through. In a span of only 17 months since its relaunching in November 2010, the PPP program was accelerated, picking up speed as momentum is gained with the closing of its first project, the Daang-Hari SLEX Link Road. It only took 13 months to get our first project tendered. In between, we worked on laying the foundations to build productive partnerships and instituted mechanisms and facilities that helped our implementing agencies to undertake projects that are properly prepared, relevant, and economically viable for both government and the private sector. This is an exciting time to be part of the Philippines PPP program, and this is what we want to share with you today. We took great care to build today's sessions to reflect the optimism and dynamism of the country's PPP program and the inspiring support that we have gained from the leaders of both the public and private sector. For our panel discussions, you will find an interesting mix of experts in the various fields of PPPs in urban renewal, tourism, and social infrastructure. They will share their experiences, plans, and overall vision for the future of the country's PPP program. We have prepared several video clips which will set the tone for each session, as well as enlighten you on the current state of PPPs, not only in the country but also from other parts of the world, as told from the point of view of our panelists. We have also tapped the expertise of 3 of the country's most respected names in the field of journalism to guide and moderate the discussions. We invite you to actively participate in our sessions We want to hear your thoughts about the program and how you think we should proceed with this undertaking. It is our hope that by the end of today's activities, you, our stakeholders and partners, will come away with a holistic view and renewed appreciation of what the country's PPP program is all about. Properly prepared projects that are guided by the principles of transparency, accountability, and good governance. Let me close by thanking all our distinguished speakers who unselfishly shared with us their precious time and knowledge. We wish to acknowledge our brilliant moderators, sharing their time and expertise. I also take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, the Philippine Contractors Association, and finally, to the invaluable support of the Asian Development Bank, ASIS, our most sincere gratitude. Thank you all, and we hope that you enjoy and learn from today's session. Good morning.
Thank you, Ms. Canilao. At this stage, may we call on the Secretary for Socio-Economic Planning, Secretary Cayetano Paderanga Jr. to deliver an opening message for today's event.
Secretary Babe Singson, esteemed panelists, that includes Mr. Jerry Esquivel of MWSS, Undersecretary Timmy Limcauco, our very important partner in the OTC, Mr. Augusto Manalo, President of the Philippine Contractors Association, Ms. Teresa C. Coson, Chairperson of the Banco de Oro, and Dato Azhar Abdul Hamid, CEO, MRT Corporation of Sundarian Berhad, esteemed colleagues in government, friends and partners in development, esteemed guests. Welcome to the Philippines. We are honored and proud that the Board of Governors of the Asian Development Bank has chosen Manila to host this year's annual meeting. This gathering is significant for us. While the annual meeting of the ADB's Board of Governors gathers together the finance ministers of its 67 member countries to provide guidance on administrative, financial, and directions of its operations, it also serves as a chance for the Philippine government to engage key stakeholders on development issues confronting not only the country, but Southeast Asia as well. The Philippines and the ADB have a shared history of partnership and cooperation that goes back to 1966. The Philippines is one of the bank's founding members and is the site of its headquarters. Today, the country affirms once again its support to ADB by hosting the bank's most important annual event. The theme of this year's annual meeting, Inclusive Growth Through Good Governance and Partnership, strikes a responsive chord in our government's efforts to eradicate poverty and empower the poor and the vulnerable. It is clearly aligned with our development principles and priorities. The Philippine government has adopted good governance as its overarching strategy to move our country forward through the Philippine Development Plan for 2011 to 2016. It is important to note that both ADB and the Philippines have placed utmost importance on transparency and integrity in handling the respective responsibilities. The Philippines to the Filipino people, and the ADB to its member countries, funders, and stakeholders. The results of this commitment to good governance have begun showing fruits. The Philippines has improved by 5 places its position in Transparency International Corruption Perception Index from 139 to 134. It also rose 10 notches overall in the World Economic Forum competitiveness rankings. Today, the Philippines is considered an emerging market economy in the region and is poised to become an influential economy in the coming years. The country's potential lies in the key growth areas of agribusiness, business process outsourcing, and tourism, which are among those featured in the Philippine Corporate and Investment Pavilion exhibit. The public-private partnership scheme can contribute substantially in advancing economic growth. We think of the private sector as the main driver of the economy, and that the PPP provides the mechanism through which collaboration between government and the private sector can be realized and strengthened, particularly in infrastructure development. Through this channel, we believe we can make use of private sector efficiencies, quick decision-making, and more focused attention to provide more efficient, customer-friendly, and reliable public services. To ensure that public-private agreements are mutually advantageous and safeguard the public's interest, the government has stressed good governance as its main guiding principle. During the rest of this forum, you will hear specifics of the plans that the government agencies have for infrastructure investments and PPP projects in particular. We hope that you will pay close attention to these presentations and find ways to collaborate with us in our development efforts. The Philippines is determined to push socio-economic development forward, and we are counting on all sectors and stakeholders to help out. For the private sector, PPP is one of the ways that it can show its contributions to this effort. We are counting on you, and we expect you to meet us halfway in a mutually useful, transparent, and reliable partnership. We Filipinos are renowned throughout the world for our warmth, grace, and hospitality. We are honored that the ADB governors and guests will experience this for themselves in Manila 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Philippines, and may you find your stay here not only productive and fulfilling, but fun as well. Thank you very much, and mabuhay.
Thank you, Secretary Paderanga. May we call on the Secretary of the Department of Public Works and Highways, Secretary Rogelio Singson, for the seminar's keynote message.
Secretary Dondon Paderanga, Executive Director Cosette Canilao, delegates and guests of the 45th Annual Meeting of the ADB Board of Governors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our partner, PCA President Tito Manalo and his colleagues. I see them full force from the Philippine Contractors Association, other panelists in the various discussion groups today, colleagues from government. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to all. Before I share with you what to expect in 2012 and beyond, allow me to give some highlights of the outlook on the Philippine economy, which should give you more confidence in investing in the infrastructure program of the Philippines. With strong government spending during the first quarter of this year, coupled with the Aquino administration's strong resolve on good governance initiatives, we expect a rosier 5 to 6% GDP growth for 2012. A string of positive factors have contributed to the renewed interest in the Philippine equities market, including last year's one-year notch rating upgrades by first Standard & Poor's, followed by Moody's, and also by Fitch Rating, and hopefully get an upgrade to investment grade very soon. The Philippine Stock Exchange Index has indeed performed very well, with more than 17 record closing highs since the start of this year alone, with a 19% growth year to date, and is considered among the top 10 performers in the world. The Philippine banking system is considered one of the healthiest in Southeast Asia, with our foreign exchange reserves of nearly $80 billion, overseas remittances of $20 billion annually, and annual revenues from BPO of $11 billion, which has also driven strong domestic consumption. Even with uncertainties brought about by debt crisis and austerity measures in Europe and in the United States, the political tension in the Middle East, which affects crude oil prices, and the recent natural disasters in Asia, you must agree that the Philippines has done a fairly good job of staying resilient despite the economic volatility around the world. Having said that, what do we expect from the Philippines in 2012 and beyond? First, under President Aquino, we will continue to push more vigorously for good governance reforms, for clean and efficient government, and sustain the tight fiscal discipline and pursue a stable growth outlook until 2016. Second, expect an acceleration of public expenditures, particularly for infrastructure and capital outlay in 2012 and beyond. What may have seemed sluggish spending in 2011 was the result of broad governance reforms for honest government and to reduce corruption that has artificially inflated the cost of public works projects in the past. My personal assessment, this has inflated costs of public works projects by easily 15 to 20%. Third, private sector will remain strong in the property sector with the continuing demand for BPO office space and residential units for families of overseas Filipinos remitting something like 12 or 20 billion yearly, and which continues to grow. Fourth, we expect expansion of private investments in energy, mining, housing, and tourism, agribusiness, information technology, transportation, and telecommunications. Fifth, with a young population where half of some 90 million Filipinos are below 25 years old, the government is focusing resources on upgrading education and social infrastructure. This will be discussed in one of the panels this afternoon. Sixth, under President Aquino, investment in infrastructure will be a main driver of sustainable growth and a better life for all Filipinos. With a strong resolve on good governance initiatives in doing things in an honest, clear, and transparent manner to provide an enabling environment conducive to private participation, both local and foreign, in infrastructure development. Under our Philippine Public Investment Plan for the period 2011 to 2016, around 30% of the estimated real GDP growth for the same period is contributed by infrastructure investment. 38% of the total investment requirement under that plan, or $45 billion out of the $120 billion will go to infrastructure development. Infrastructure spending will definitely be a major employment generator. These investments will include roads and bridges, airports, railways, water supply and sanitation, seaports, tourism infrastructure, and we will be using GOP or government resources, ODA funding, and with options on PPP mode of financing. Seventh, to ensure efficient use of government resources, we have developed a convergence program among infrastructure agencies to make sure that government projects are well coordinated and coherent. The DPWH has a convergence program with the Department of Tourism to support the infrastructure requirements of our country's tourism master plan. Another convergence program is with the Department of Transport and Communication to ensure that there is good quality roads accessing our airports and designated seaports. We also have a convergence program with the Department of Agriculture, National Irrigation Administration, and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources to ensure that we develop projects to optimize the use of our country's water resources. Finally, the specific major opportunities for the private sector in broad strokes. In the transport sector, allow me to mention some of these projects. 3, possibly 4 rail projects, 4 airport projects, 3 seaport projects, 5 major road projects as part of the high standard highway master plan for Greater Metro Manila and within a 200-kilometer radius. We currently have 300 kilometers of operating toll roads. 112 kilometers are ongoing construction, and another 155 in the pipeline for toll road projects for the private sector. In addition, the DPWH is implementing some $1.6 billion worth of official development assistance projects from JICA, World Bank, and ADB, which is open for international competitive bidding. We have also launched recently the PPP for school buildings to construct some 30,000 classrooms nationwide. The first 10,000, the bidding for the first 10,000 is actually ongoing. Opportunities in tourism-related facilities, which will be discussed in detail this afternoon. Other investment opportunities are in water supply and sanitation, agriculture, health, and information technology. I suggest that if you want details, please contact our PPP Center. They have their own booth downstairs. In closing, this government will continue to seek lasting partnership with the private sector in pursuing more investments in infrastructure as we try to catch up with our Asian neighbors in infrastructure development and sustain the country's growth. What we offer the private sector and investors is transparent and good governance principles to make sure you will find investing in the Philippines more fun and rewarding. Allow me, therefore, to thank all of you for your keen interest in investing in the Philippines. Thank you, and mabuhay to everyone.
Thank you, Secretary Singson. We will now proceed to our first panel discussion titled Build to Grow, Investing on Urban Development Through Infrastructure. The session will discuss investment opportunities in Philippine urban development through a wide range of infrastructure projects under the public-private partnership. To learn more about the session's topic, let us all watch this video.
Philippine cities generate 80% of the country's economic output and 70% of the country's household expenditures. No wonder cities and urban centers are seen as areas of growth and opportunity, inevitably resulting in a rural to urban migration trend. Currently, 49% of the country's total population, or 45.6 million people, are living in cities, nearly 12 million of whom are residing in Metro Manila. By 2030, it is projected that up to 77% of the country's total population will call cities home. Rapid urbanization calls for more effective and efficient infrastructure and systems to deliver the most basic services to all areas of the urban population, most especially to the most vulnerable and marginalized.
Well, there is infrastructure. It's not enough. We always need to invest more. It's unavoidable that people come to the cities for opportunities. So the population that needs to be served is always going to be increasing. Land is not being created anymore, so we're now going to have to go vertical. And that means it's more expensive to create the infrastructure, but we need to do that. Otherwise, quality of life deteriorates, cost of doing business increases, and economic opportunities will be dissipated. So we will continue to invest in the infrastructure that's necessary in order that the city will continue to function. An example of that is the so-called integrated transport terminals. There are nearly 4,500 provincial buses from the north, meaning this is Bulacan, Pampanga, Tarlac, etc. From the north, there are 4,500 buses that come into the city every day. There are 85 provincial bus terminals all over the city. So all these provincial buses are all over the city using up very, very scarce road space and even having to go to the narrow streets. So we're investing in an infrastructure projects in the north where all of these provincial buses will terminate there. So it sort of organizes itself. At that point, people can then transfer to MRT, LRT, or to the city buses. That way, it's more organized, there's lesser traffic, the quality of life improves, we save on fuel because we won't be stuck on traffic as much, and so on and so forth. 4,500 buses from the north, another nearly 4,000 buses from the south. We're doing a similar thing for Cavite, Laguna, Batangas. We want to have a livable city. We want to have a city that serves the needs of its residents. And we want to have a city that provides adequate opportunities for economic activity, not only for her citizens or residents, but for those in the neighboring areas as well. One of the reasons we are extending the rail systems into the countryside is to, in fact, enlarge the available space for economic activity, as opposed to having it simply within a very, very small confined space. So these are ways how government can invest in infrastructure to put greater sanity in the traffic and transport systems within the city.
We really need to upgrade the quality of infrastructure in our urban centers. What we're trying to do is improve the quality riding surface of our national roads in the urban centers. We want to also make sure that our roads are safe for pedestrians. We have taken this for granted all these years. Our pedestrians take their rides on the carriageway instead of taking their rides on the sidewalk. What we've found out is our roads are not safe for pedestrians because our sidewalks have been taken over by shops, by vendors, by almost everything, including utility poles. Pedestrians end up walking on the roadway rather than on the sidewalk, which makes it very unsafe. So what we're doing is we're recovering all of our road right-of-way and clearing any obstructions on our road right-of-way. To me, that is a very important component of upgrading our national roads, especially in urban centers. We have a paradigm shift in terms of flood control. Because of climate change, what used to be several days or weeks of rainfall all of a sudden is dropped in 6-8 hours.
Let me start with the three gentlemen who have both public and private expertise or experience in our panel today. We begin with Secretary of Public Works, Rogelio Singson. Mr. Singson rejoined government in 2010. It's actually his third time in government. Before this stint, he was president of Manila Water. That supplies the western half of Metro Manila. So that includes this area. So if your water in this area is good, you have him to thank for that. Before that, he was also chairman and president of Bases Conversion and Development Authority. He bid out parts of our military bases, and also that includes Clark and Subic and Fort Bonifacio and Villamor. He also arranged the JBIC financing for the Subic-Clark-Tarlac Expressway. In his earliest incarnation in government, he was the Assistant Cabinet Secretary and also the Executive Director of the Coordinating Council for the Philippine Assistance Program for President Cory Aquino. That's Secretary Rogelio Singson. Also joining us today is the Undersecretary for the DOTC, the Department of Transportation and Communication. He is the Undersecretary for Planning and Infrastructure Projects, Mr. Renel Limcauco over here. He joined the government last year. Previous to that, he was president of Laika Auto Nation, which is a car dealership, car repair, car rental, and other auto businesses combined in that company. He's a lawyer who teaches a couple of legal courses in Ateneo,
and he practiced law before that, both at Price Waterhouse and at Kisumbing Torres, which is the local affiliate of Baker McKenzie. Everybody knows Mr. Renel Limcauco as Timmy. I certainly know him as Timmy. In the interest of full disclosure, we are brothers-in-law. So I can't ask him very hard questions because he's my seatmate on Sunday lunch. Also with us today is Jerry Esquivel on my left side. Mr. Esquivel is an architect by training and a contractor and a developer by trade. His most recognizable structure probably is the first tall building in the Cubao area. It would be in the corner of EDSA and P. Tuason. He's now the head of the Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System. So with these three gentlemen, you have both public and private expertise behind them. Our visitor today is from Malaysia. Dato Azhar Abdul Hamid is the Chief Executive of MRT Corp. That's the MRT Corp, not here, but in Malaysia. They are building the Klang Valley Mass Rapid Transit, which I think the DOTC will be interested to know is 51 kilometers and 31 stations. He also has private sector experience. He was previously with Sime Darby, handling several of their businesses there. Our two finalist speakers today are Mr. Augusto Tito Manalo. He is the president of the Philippine Constructors Association. He is a contractor by trade, and he's also a member of the Pasig People's Economic Council, the vice chairman of that, actually. He's also the past president of the Philippine Constructors Association Golf Club. I'm not sure if he spends more time building or playing golf. Our final speaker today, our final panelist today, obviously not the least, is Ms. Teresita C. Coson. She is the vice chairwoman of SM Investments Corporation, which owns the biggest retail company, the biggest shopping mall company, and the biggest banking company in the Philippines. They also own this building and everything you see around this building. That has obviously included her many times in lists such as Fortune's Most Powerful Women. So you can see it's a very good panel we have here this morning. We're going to be taking questions at any time. If you just stand up by one of the mics, I will. If you stand up long enough by one of the mics, I'll call you so we can make this as interactive as possible. I've also told them that they can ask questions of each other and also elaborate on points that the others have made. Okay, so let's begin actually with our lone visitor today. Azhar is head of MRT Corp, which was set up last year to build this 51-kilometer MRT system around Kuala Lumpur. We were speaking ahead of time earlier today, and he was telling me that MRT Corp is a government corporation. The project itself wasn't bid out, but they do bid out obviously parts of the project. I'd like to ask him, what's the advantage of having the government own the project, as opposed to what I think the Philippine government is trying to do with many projects, which is to bid them out as PPPs.
So first of all, thank you to the organizers for having me here today. Going straight to the question that you just asked, I think first and foremost we need to establish the who, the what's, and the hows. Now, as far as urban transportation is concerned, if you look at Malaysia today, the route that we've taken is that the responsibility of providing good urban infrastructure actually rests with government. Now, the issue of how, the Malaysian government has basically made a very conscious decision that, just like what the Philippines government is promoting, the issue of PPP, getting the public sector and the private sector to work together to make sure that the benefits of urban transport in a city like Kuala Lumpur is actually made efficient, ensure that it is effective, and most important of all, to make sure that the benefits actually comes and basically makes the future of the city as an economic center and also a social center successful and viable. And for Kuala Lumpur, just like Metro Manila, livability is an issue for us. And for the government, its responsibility is to come up with a master plan to actually undertake the project, come up with the funding. And the good thing about Malaysia today is that this project is very firmly supported by the financial sector. So 100% of the funding is actually coming from the capital market and not from the government. And ultimately there will be bonds issues, of course, but the delivery, the risk of delivery, both in terms of total cost and time, is actually transferred to the private sector, which means the government has learned a lot from the past, where it has basically given major contracts to major contractors, but still retain the risks of delivery and cost. Now, this is a major change for Malaysia today, and this has basically given birth to this concept that we call having a project delivery partner tied to every major infrastructure project that we are going to undertake. Thank you.
Could I ask the Undersecretary of Transportation how that compares with our government's analysis of how to proceed with such projects?
Well, let me say at the outset that the thinking after hearing that is very similar. At the DOTC, we look at PPP as one of the many factors in our arsenal in project delivery. So we look at PPP, we can avail of the government funds, we can avail of official development assistance. We look at all three with the immediate goal, or with the main focus on delivering the infrastructure project as efficiently and as expeditiously and as cheaply as possible to the Philippine population. So I would say it would be very similar in goal. It's project delivery in order that the infrastructure may be delivered as quickly as possible.
The approach is very similar, but let me say outright, and I did mention this to Mr. Hamid, if there's any model for national road network that we want to follow in Asia, it would be Malaysia. The road network there is first class. The quality of roads on national roads is first class. So, as I said, I told him, I admire the development of the national roads in Malaysia. Having said that, in terms of the flagship projects in Malaysia, I understand this used to be directly under the office of the Prime Minister. So that, to me, makes a lot of difference. Okay? Now, in our case, the big projects are still within the departments. Okay? Now, of course, you go through layers of approvals. Seriously, we are in the process of looking at how we can accelerate or hasten the approval process. And frankly, coming from the private sector, that's a struggle. I wish we could do it a little faster, and the approval processes could be done more expeditiously. So in terms of funding, as Attorney Timmy said, we have in fact options, no? Either use GOP funding, ODA, or PPP, in other words, private sector. But personally, I'd like to really push as much as I can to the private sector, especially in moving the commercial risks and execution timetables. The private sector definitely has a lot more advantage in terms of flexibility as against government, because we're governed by audit rules that could end up in jail if you don't observe the proper rules. No? In my experience in government, good intentions sometimes is not good enough. You just have to follow rules before the good intentions. Because otherwise, as I said, you might end up in jail.
Oh, you're my boss. I'm not too sure if I agree that everything should be privatized. In my sector in water, I think that the water source should be state-owned and should not be delegated to private sector. I understand that even watershed management and all the peripherals around water source should be is the responsibility of the state. So insofar as roads and tollways and airports may be, but for my end, water source development is state-owned. So in our agency, we're trying to develop a new water source, and I've been telling my people all this time that because of the many people that I have to talk to, PPP, NGOs, LGUs, I even talk to nuns and priests just to get the new water source going, and I tell them that I think at this point in time, I think that only God gives a dam. He's the only one that can build a dam at this point in time, but we remain hopeful. I remain hopeful that because of our intentions and the leadership of my boss, Secretary Singson, that we may be able to address this with PPP. The latest time possible is October of this year. So yes, PPP can be done, but insofar as water source management, it should be state-owned.
Jerry, were you once studying to be a priest?
Yes, that has nothing to do with my...
That must help him in dealing with those nuns and priests, no?
Yes.
Let's ask the two private sector representatives here, no? Both from the Constructors Association and Ms. C. Coson. They're talking about how difficult it is from their end to proceed with this project because of all these hurdles that I guess are put there to stop corruption, but could also be an opportunity for corruption as well. How would you like the system to change so that you can proceed faster?
Oh, yeah. With regard to that, if we in the construction industry are happy that this PPP is finally pushing through, no? We feel that the objectives being set, such as eradicating corruption and pushing for good governance, could be achieved in such a system. However, we feel that there's a need for good fiscal and legal support on the part of government for these projects to push through. So if we do not have that support, then we feel that it would be hard for the projects to push through. Take a case at point that we're doing right now is the T-Plex project in Tarlac, Pangasinan, La Union Expressway. No? So that project was awarded in 2009, and it's now ongoing, and it's an 88-kilometer road that's going to traverse up to La Union and would cut the travel time to Baguio substantially. Now, with regard to that, we feel that the partnership with government is proving to be a good one because the structures are in place, the support of government is in place, and we're proud to say that that project is 100% Filipino designed, constructed, and being financed, syndicated by local banks. So that we feel, in essence, could come up to a standard for a PPP project in the future. Thank you.
Ms. C, the SM Group has said that they will not directly involve themselves in PPP projects. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we're not, as a group, we're not interested in the PPP project, but we're interested in funding the PPP project. My role today is to express support for the government infrastructure, be it PPP, ODA, or even government funding. We can work with the contractor down the road or with private sectors. I'm representing Banco de Oro, and I think the other banks will agree with me that we can fund many of these projects locally. Of course, we would welcome foreign fundings, government fundings, or the multilateral fundings in these areas to have additional fundings in the big projects. The market here is very liquid, and I think we can do a lot of this here locally. And what I wanted to say is, since we can do this locally by syndications, perhaps up to about $1 billion, it will show confidence in the infrastructures project. So here if we fund it locally, we don't have foreign exchange risk. I mean, when I was talking about the $1 billion, it's in peso denomination. So we don't have a government risk. We don't have political risk. The local banks will be able to take that risk. So the fundings from the multilateral or foreign fundings will be additions to this. And with the confidence that we show the other funders, I guess it will enhance the credibility of our projects. So it doesn't matter whether it's PPP or government fundings. I think as a bank, we'll be able to fund a lot of the companies down the road.
We keep on hearing that there is a lot of money in the Philippine financial system and that the funding is just waiting to be tapped. So let me ask the government officials again, what is the one thing that could speed up the process going forward? I mean, we heard that in essentially the first 2 years of the government, the first 1.5 years, you were restudying the projects to make sure that they were properly designed, there was no corruption in them. 1.5 years or 2 years in, what can we do to really speed them up this year?
The position of government is that we opted to, as much as possible, go through the solicitation process. And necessarily, it will take a bit longer than an unsolicited project. No? But having said that, I think we're doing our best to bring out more PPP projects as soon as possible. Now, it's good to hear that there's a lot of liquidity in the local banking system, and I think in the discussions that we've been having, because in the case of the DPWH, before we launch any PPP project, we bring in all the sectors, contractors, investors, banking community, and ask them what is needed to enhance further this particular project that we are launching soon. No? And it's been very helpful to us in government to determine and package the project properly. And that will hasten, rather than just unilaterally from government bring it out only to find out that there are many concerns from the various stakeholders. So what we do is have a lot of pre-consultations with the interested stakeholders so that we iron out everything before we formally bring it to the bidding table.
Azhar, how different is it in Malaysia, since all the big projects are under the Prime Minister's office? Does that cut through a lot of red tape?
It does. I think in more ways than one, to be honest. I think if you look at execution, I mean, having a project like this under the Prime Minister's department makes it a lot easier to execute, simply because, like what Excellency just said, it cuts through a whole host of bureaucratic process. And for the project that I'm currently handling, what the government has done right, I think, is forming a government EXCO committee that meets every 2 weeks, and within this EXCO sits all the relevant ministries and departments, and they're all represented as far as the MRT project is concerned. And decisions are made on the spot, without having to write letters, to put in formal applications. When the meeting says it's done, you move on. So it really cuts a lot of time and saves a lot of energy in getting relevant approvals. But having said that, we also make sure that proper governance are in place, in making sure that all these approvals are done and initiated properly within relevant guidelines and laws. So it's a big advantage.
Ms. C, Secretary Singson, why were you laughing so hard when he was talking about how they cut through the red tape?
Because there will be, if we were to be as efficient as that, some department will be cut.
Sino yun dito? Secretary Singson, same reason?
Exactly what TSC said. No? We have to push, and I think if we bring it up as high as possible, then we are able to navigate faster rather than navigating through several departments. Just on right-of-way alone, in most of these projects, a lot of the delays happen in the right-of-way acquisition. And the funds are there. It's not an issue of funding. It's just getting the right-of-way in place for the contractors to start working.
Do you have something similar to this every 2-week meeting they have for infrastructure?
Well, there is a economic clusters meeting that happens every 2 weeks, and more often than not, we try to track all of the pipeline projects, big-ticket pipeline projects.
So infrastructure projects take up a lot of the time of the Eco Cluster. Yes. Tito, how have you found bidding for projects now compared with previous governments?
It's a good question. My
Your
executive
table is
director is laughing. Should I say the truth? Anyway, Secretary,
And you're right in between DOTC and DPWH.
There's more transparency now. That's what we see, and we appreciate that a lot because these more participants are coming to the picture, and we're looking at improving quality, not only cost but quality too. No? But having said that, we feel that the price ranges are indeed getting tight.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Are indeed getting tight. I mean, the budget is tight for us, but we feel that even if we are doing these projects on a tight budget, our obligation is to do it in quality and in time. So we're committed to this. No? So Secretary is laughing.
I know. The budget is tight sounds like code word for I don't know what.
No, it's not a code word, but it's because we bid on cost. So when you bid for a project, initially you're pre-qualified to bid for a project, and then you bid on cost. So we found that the budgets are really getting tight. So Secretary Singson is really doing his homework.
Go ahead.
Coco, may I just say this? No? I have been meeting with the Philippine Contractors Association on a regular basis, precisely because we're running out of good contractors. They have shied away from government projects in the past. And we have been meeting with them to really open up the market for more private sector, reliable contractors to participate in government projects. As I said, in the bidding, pre-qualification, requirements, and so on, I continue to meet with them and ask them what will make you come back and do more government projects. I'm really running out of reliable contractors in the public sector.
But that's your fault. You hired one of the reliable contractors to join the government. Jerry, could you share with us those thoughts?
I'm happy that Ms. Coson is very aggressive on lending and that Malaysia is doing the same. It's just that ADB has given us a grant on modality, financial modality, to check on the matrix of tariff. My job is really to balance that need of that new water source which will strain supply and demand in the future, and at the same time work on tariff sensitivity. So I'd rather have, and when we've researched on this, that water is inelastic, all the Filipinos will pay probably 50 pesos for a glass of water when there's no more water. We're trying to balance out the need and the matrix of tariff. So I'm very happy that BDO and all the other lending institutions, private, will help us together with ADB, helping us on the modality of the financial structure. So now our job is to prepare that matrix and make sure that by 2022, when we really need that new water source, we will have that, and the tariff is good for the 15 million Filipino consumers.
Good morning. I guess I'm one of the urban dwellers very concerned about the effect of climate change, which Secretary Singson mentioned earlier. May we know what's going on there? I know that the former president of the MAP, Mr. Palafox, has been talking about a submission that he made years ago and was resubmitted to President Aquino, according to him anyway. So what's going on? Because the rainy season is coming up again, and we don't want a repeat of Ondoy, and people really need to know and be assured that things are moving forward. Thank you.
Can I just insert? I know you've talked about flood control systems, etc. When you elaborate on that, could you tell us what part of it can be PPP, if any?
The way we're developing just to answer very quickly, we're done with the master plan for Metro Manila flood management. Okay? The first order of the day is for us to roll out a 6-hour early warning system before a flood occurrence happens. Okay? In other words, we hope to be able to avoid a lot of casualties. Now, if you tell me that, are we ready for another Ondoy? Ondoy, I understand, is a 125-year flood return situation. We're not ready for a 125-year flood situation. Our flood systems may be good for 20, 25 years. Now, and that's why the master plan that we are putting in place should be able to reduce what we refer to as the excess runoff during peak situations. Because our system is good for 25 years, and therefore, if the spike in the amount of rainfall happens in a very short duration, you have to store that water somewhere else before it goes into the existing waterways. So we have a whole range of programs, and hopefully Ondoy doesn't happen except in the next 125 years, so that we don't have another Ondoy that soon. But I can assure you we're doing our best to reduce the probability of casualties by rolling out a system that will give 6-hour warning in our major river systems.
Is any part of that open to PPP?
At this time, no, except maybe for a dam in the upstream Marikina River, which could actually be used for water supply. So there's a possibility.
In our own small way, our SM Shopping Center is looking into that for the community that we're serving. Like in Baguio, we actually have big rainwater collections, which which became a controversy because they were all concentrated on the trees. We have about more than 1,000 trees in our area, and they were concentrated on 100+ trees. Anyway, in that development, we have a big rainwater collections that will prevent the flood in the Sessions Road. So, even the private area, we're conscious about it.
Could I ask Undersecretary Limcaoco and Secretary Singson, what is the most important PPP project you have in the pipeline, especially for urban areas like Manila, and how is it going to change living in Manila? Yusek Limcaoco.
Well, let me take this opportunity to maybe plug one of our projects and at the same time answer your question. Probably the most important project this year, in terms of which we'd measure in terms of size, would be our LRT1 extension project to the south, to Bacoor, Cavite. Now, this is a 60 billion peso project, which I think best exemplifies the marriage of private sector participation and government input, wherein the private sector will be tasked through the PPP to build the viaduct for the train, and with the government contributing its share in the project by way of rolling stock. Therefore, the risk of delivery, and when you talk about efficiency, we are transferring to the private sector under the assumption that the private sector will be more responsive and more agile, whereas the lesser task, or the task with the lesser moving parts of procuring the rolling stock, would be left given to the government. The result of this would be an additional 200 to 300,000 people who will be given the chance to travel at a very reliable rate with a time that is time certain. They don't have to brave the traffic anymore. And then so you have all these time savings that will benefit the millions of residents in the southern part of Metro Manila. So that would clearly be one of the largest, one of the most important projects that we are undertaking this year. And to plug some more, the bid will be out in the next few days. So more marketing is good.
Tito, are you and the other contractors all ready to bid for parts of this project already?
I know one is on that group there. So, but if I may, maybe since Mr. Hamid is here and from the MTR also, I guess maybe he can share also some of his insights with regards to the MTR project that they're doing, because it would be some sort of similar to what the OTC would be doing in LRT1.
I think that's actually very, very true. I think we do have our own extension project going on for the LRT in Kuala Lumpur as well. And of course, in addition to that, I have my own MRT project being developed, and that's a fresh project as far as the urban transport infrastructure is concerned. Emphasis is the same. It's to basically remove some of the congestion issues in the city that we have today. It may be a little different from Metro Manila, because our problem is basically having too many private cars on the road, as opposed to having buses coming into Manila. And the simple reason is this: I mean, we in Malaysia, we don't have it all perfect. As well, we do have some issues as well, because objectives needs to be balanced. And I think a lot of people in the room will probably be aware that whilst Malaysia is looking very, very seriously at economic transformation, we need to synchronize some of these objectives in terms of balance, because whilst we are building the metro in Kuala Lumpur and also improving the LRT in Kuala Lumpur, we also have highway objectives, building more highways, and also trying to promote our own automobile industry, which to some people may be contradicting objectives. They contradict each other. And in most established cities in the world, you see whenever a urban rail transport system is being proposed, the first lobbyist group will come from the automobile industry, because they don't want to see it improve, because it's not in their interest to have a good urban transport system. So we need to balance this. I mean, in our journey to be a developed nation, and the target is 2020, we have to make sure that we are extremely objective in some of the initiatives that we are taking to ensure that at the end of the day, it's the people that benefit most from it. And in cities like Kuala Lumpur, which I feel is no different from Metro Manila. The most important group, if I may say so personally, to basically target is this group of people that we refer to as the urban poor. Whilst they have to live in cities, they need to survive in cities. They have families in cities. So in providing this efficient and effective urban transport system, you're basically directly or indirectly making their burden lighter by not having, like in Kuala Lumpur, by not having to own a car. Because today, without an efficient transport system, you're almost forced to own a car. So it is a burden on your domestic account, your own family expenditure. So these are issues that we have to address, because if not addressed well, it can turn into a big problem in the future. But in addition to this, in undertaking projects like LRT extension and MRT, of course the spin-offs are also good for the city and national economy. You know, employment, getting jobs out there, making sure the economy is vibrant, and the private sector will definitely benefit from all this.
Let me see, how important is it that these, for example, the MRT stations are very close to, if not practically within, the shopping malls that you own and operate?
I think that will make the station busier, and that means more ridership. In this area of the LRT, MRT, I think they have different stations, and I think if they develop it, it will be good.
I just want to ask, because I understand that all projects now in PPP are supposed to be solicited. Is the government no longer entertaining a possible reopening for unsolicited, for the purpose of expediency? For Secretary Singson.
I would say, personally, I'm not talking for NEDA or for the Office of the President. The policy is solicited, okay? But I would imagine if there are good projects out there which the government has not thought of and it's not in its pipeline of projects, then I would imagine a unsolicited could still be possible. What is not allowed is if they are already in the pipeline of projects and all of a sudden you receive or accept an unsolicited proposal.
Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were some unsolicited proposals for water systems when you arrived.
As mentioned, in 1974, we already had studies for Laiban Dam. That was 36 long years ago. And now I think Secretary Singson and I share the same urgency to build this new water source. But because of the nature of solicited and unsolicited proposals, we're trying very hard to work with PPP, with NEDA, with all the limitations, may I use that word, Secretary Singson, with all the limitations of bureaucracy to make this new water source done or at least advertised by this year. But I'm really tempted sometimes, given the nature of my private life, to do unsolicited proposals, because at the end of the day, when we don't have water, I cannot tell the 15 million Filipinos I was confined, I was constricted, I was limited to NEDA ICC approval, I was limited to PPP approval. My job is to provide that new water source by hook or by crook, and, well, no, sorry, I'm sorry, no crooks here. Sorry, Secretary Singh, so I didn't mean it that way. I mean to be single-minded on this. So Laiban Dam is still in process, but we're doing our darn best to work on our math and our science to build that new water source soonest.
Could you give us a small picture of how a Laiban Dam unsolicited proposal, which is supposed to be more efficient, takes 36 years?
Well, I don't want to blame people. It's been a long time blaming people. The deal is, Laiban Dam is now with, I think, 4,000, a little less than 4,000 inhabitants. It'll cost us more to remove them than to build a new one. While in truth, we've already made some improvements on it. We've prepared intake already, but and it requires so much fortitude, not only from myself, but the secretary, the president, and all LGUs concerned to put this together. So I'm still not putting down that project, but we're very, very open and very, very keen on other river basins like Agos, Kaliwa, and Kanan River.
Could I ask the government officials to address particularly his point about, or his impression that most of the projects seem to be Manila-based and very few in the Visayas and Mindanao? Is that true?
Talking about the roadmap for PPP, we have been saying all along that we have a long list of PPP projects that have been generated by all the other agencies and in support of the Aquino administration's 6-point agenda. Now, in the case of power, the Department of Energy, Secretary Almendras, is aware, and in fact, I'd suggest if San Miguel is interested in any of the power projects, they should simply just sit down with the Department of Energy. Now, in the case of the manual, they just launched recently. I know San Miguel has been very busy buying new deals, so I probably missed this. You probably missed this out. They just launched a PPP manual for LGUs. If I'm not mistaken, a week. March is apparently when they launched the manual, precisely to encourage more local PPP projects. Now, the issue of roads, we have been concentrating on Metro Manila and 200 kilometers radius outside of Metro Manila. And this goes all the way to the area of Central Luzon, Cabanatuan, San Jose. We have a PPP project there, and the Cavite Laguna is on the southern portion of that 200-kilometer radius. So we have a master plan for high-standard highway, and this could be either funded through PPP or ODA or GOP. That's in place. We are implementing that. Now, our biggest challenge, my biggest challenge right now is how to decongest EDSA. Now, and that's why we have two projects that we are clearly finalizing within the next 2 weeks. One is to take away from EDSA the through traffic, those that will go from north to south. Hopefully they don't have to be on EDSA. The other one would be those coming from the south going into the areas of Mandaluyong, San Juan, and Quezon City. We hope that they can already use what we refer to as the C3 link, which will connect to the Skyway. And the other one would be North Luzon connector link. Again, the whole objective is to take away the through traffic that continues to utilize EDSA.
Undersecretary Lim Cauco, could you address those 2 points about the apparent lack of a roadmap and also the concentration within the Metro Manila area?
Well, let me take the concentration issue first. At the DOTC, just on our airport projects alone, will show that we do not have a Luzon-centric focus, but rather a nationwide focus. For example, just this year alone, we are going to be implementing airports in Puerto Princesa in Palawan, in Bohol, in Panglao, and then also we are going to be expanding the Cebu-Mactan Airport to double its capacity. That's another major project. And also in Cagayan de Oro, the Laguindingan Airport, which will be finished by this year. And the operations and management will be PPP, if you, for lack of a better term, also this year. So just in terms of airports, we do have a nation-centric view as opposed to what is perceived to be a Luzon-centric view. And also on the road and rail, we are also implementing or starting to develop a bus rapid transit system in Cebu, specifically for the city of Cebu, which a bus rapid transit is essentially a more inexpensive version of a light rail system. So that should hopefully address the Luzon-centric criticism or opinion.
Administrator Esquivel, whether solicited or unsolicited, are your projects centered here or spread out?
MWSS is just Metro Manila based.
Sorry.
But to take Mr. Ortiz's comment on roadmaps, I don't know if he's interested in water, but we have in our own agency a roadmap for water security. So if he's open to it, he can talk to me and I can share with him that roadmap.
Private-public sector interaction is important, not just for now, but also for the future. Of course, going forward, making sure that this continues in terms of operating and maintaining infrastructures like urban rail is important, and the PPP concept will also exist from that perspective. And I personally have no doubt that it's something that we need, and I think it's something that will be viewed very favorably and very strongly in the future. Thank you.
There are Malaysian companies that would bid for Philippine PPPs?
I'd like to think so. I think at the end of the day, we are in one region, and our interest is to make sure that our region develops well and stands competitive for the future. And if we can do that, then we're good for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. C?
I think all the work on PPP and the other infrastructures financing should really go faster for our economic growth. And just like to inform the group that the private financing is also open, and we like to be part of it.
Ms. C's investment banker, oh, he's gone. He's probably outside waiting for clients outside. Secretary Singson.
Yeah, it's always encouraging for us to know that the local banks are ready to support infrastructure development. This was a very different story some years back when the government only had to rely on ODA for its big ticket items. But now that we see the private sector ready to support infrastructure development, we should really push more to the private sector for them to be able to take on more investments in the area of roads, tourism, and other areas for infrastructure development. And as I said, we continue to dialogue with them every time that before we launch anything, just to make sure that all the stakeholders' concerns are addressed before we launch or put on the bidding table any of our projects.
Yeah, we in the construction sector believe that PPP is a good driver for growth. It could push a lot of projects, especially that funding is available, as mentioned earlier. It has been proven, and it's being done right now. And we believe that if we carry it forward, it could be a good source of development for our country. It could battle against corruption, and at the same time also push forward the government's agenda of development. With reference to our capabilities, we are looking at strategic alliances also with developers and investment companies who would be willing to stake in this future PPP projects.
Undersecretary Limcaoco.
Well, for the DOTC, because of the mega trend of urbanization in the Philippines, we see the large opportunity in terms of PPP and infrastructure development would be in the rail, clearly would be in the rail sector. Going forward, our plans would be to develop rail and other mass transit systems from the suburban areas of Metro Manila, that will be in the south and the north, to feed or to provide opportunity for efficient transportation for people to work into Metro Manila. That would be one of the first phases. And then concurrently, the other opportunity would be improving or building more rail or more mass rapid transit systems inside Metro Manila itself in order to lessen the transportation friction, or the hassles of everyday transportation that a Metro Manila resident has to go through commuting from work to home or from home to other destinations and other origins.
Administrator Esquivel.
I think one of the pillars of NEDA PPP is openness and transparency. But other than that, I think it has to be reliability, respect, and intergenerationality. Even if water has no political boundaries, water has no economic boundaries, water has no boundaries at all, it is for everybody. So I invite all of the proponents to include water and sewage and sanitation in their mindset. I know that the railways is good, I understand MRTs is good, but you won't have anything of this without water. So I invite all of you, we're open, we're transparent, we have a very good program with our two concessionaires, Maynilad and Manila Water. We've been there since 1997 as PPP. It's not perfect. We've been doing our roughing, streamlining the edges, but I assure you that MWSS will continue to respect the two concessionaires and hopefully get some more proponents into water and sewerage and sanitation. Thank you.
I would like to address this question to Dr. Hamid. Listening to your 51-kilometer MRT project, I believe you have been successfully implemented the project, bringing the private sector to work with the government, and especially when you mentioned that you managed to secure 100% financing from the private capital. I believe that is a big achievement of your project. You mentioned a little bit about one of the key factors of your success is the development of the project delivery partner. May you elaborate a little bit, please, about this concept and other concepts, the key factors that you managed to bring the private sector capital financing to support 100% of your project, because funding is the key element of all the project financing, and PPP project, if you don't get the financial support, of course there will be no project. I don't know what your IRR or your ridership is, but I believe the Malaysian government must have provided a lot of support. So if you could be kind enough to show how you manage to bring all of this success from the capital financing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think I'll deal with the second issue first, which with regards to funding. As far as the MRT project is concerned, we started off with a lot of uncertainties, and that was one of the key issues that we had to address when MRT Corporation first came along. Communication, of course, is important, and especially communicating with your potential funders, actually telling them what your plans are, how you want to execute those plans, and what your key deliverables or the timing of your key deliverables are concerned. And that has been, to a large extent, very well received by a lot of the funders. And even before we called for the funding to proposals to come in, people were actually chasing us to know more about what opportunities lie with regards to making the funding available. For us, it's extremely fortunate because today Malaysia is we're in a good position as far as liquidity is concerned, and we didn't have a lot of problems getting this in. And of course, with the support from the government, especially from our Ministry of Finance, we were able to get 100% support from the commercial banks in Malaysia. And to our pleasant surprise, there were also a lot of foreign interests as far as participating in the funding is concerned. So from many regards, from many aspects, we were very fortunate. Moving on to this PDP concept. Now, as I said earlier, one of the key learning points as far as government projects or contracts are concerned was that in the past, government basically held on to the risks of delivery and costs. And this is the first time in Malaysia that we are deploying the PDP concept. And it involves basically identifying a reputable and credible partner to actually work with government or government-appointed companies and basically taking over responsibility for risks that were previously carried by the government, i.e. the delivery and cost issues. And what has happened is MRT Corporation signs a PDP agreement with our partner, which is, I don't mind saying it here, with MMC Gamuda, which is a consortium or a joint venture of two local Malaysian companies. And based on that agreement, together we will basically initiate awards of contracts or tenders to local as well as foreign companies to undertake packages for development of the MRT project. In total, we have something like 86 packages. We have awarded half of them. And recently, I think you may have read in the press that we've awarded the underground package, which is worth about 8.2 billion ringgit. We are basically moving very quickly to make sure that we complete the award of all 86 packages by the end of the year. And the key feature here is, in making this award, we want to make sure that we choose credible contractors to undertake the relevant packages that we have. And in the PDP agreement, a key component of the PDP agreement is a step-in clause, whereby if for whatever reason the contractor that we choose fails to deliver or is seen to potentially fail to deliver that piece of the work as far as the MRT project is concerned, PDP, our partner, is legally obliged by the agreement that we've signed to step in and complete the job. And that, to me, is one of the key things that we have incorporated in this PDP relationship. Now, by being able to do that, it will ensure that the project risk is managed well. And I don't have to elaborate about the cost issues. And if, let's say, PDP fails to comply with that, then there are penalty clauses in the PDP agreement. So it is a very intense and very serious relationship, and it is a relationship that will be tested in the coming years. But with what we have achieved so far, we are now embarking on a second PDP relationship in another major project in Malaysia, which we call River of Life project, which involves the cleaning up of all the rivers that actually lead into Kuala Lumpur. So it is a project now that is better understood and better received. And I'm quite confident that there will be more government projects that will follow this PDP concept.
DPWH has been studying several alignments, as I said, precisely to decongest EDSA. Some of these projects will be government finance, while others, because there are already proponents who have made an offer. One is the NLEX-SLEX link, and that is we've actually given, the government has actually given original proponent status to the Metro Pacific group. Another offer is coming from CITRA, which is to connect the Skyway and into the San Juan, Mandaluyong, and connecting to E. Rodriguez and, if I'm not mistaken, Araneta Avenue, which is very similar to the proposal of to connect the C3 link. The C3 link, well, a little bit backward. C4 is EDSA. C3 is the Araneta Avenue, which is supposed to connect all the way to Buendia. Unfortunately, we have a gap somewhere in San Juan and portions of Mandaluyong and Makati. So that's the link that we are trying to connect. Now, we have studied several links, including the offer and the alignment being proposed by MMDA, which is the Sky Bridge. The Sky Bridge is basically going to connect the same Araneta to Makati using the Pasig River alignment and the San Juan River alignment. So, having said that, DOTC and DPWH have made a proposal that we allow both alignments to proceed, and this is the NLEX-SLEX link and the C3 alignment being proposed by Citra San Miguel Group, which is using their existing franchise, which is under TRB. So the potential of two projects being or proceeding together simultaneously is a very big possibility. One connecting to the Skyway, the other also connecting to the Skyway, but going all the way to North Luzon Expressway using the PNR alignment. The other one is simply using existing road right-of-way that connects from the Skyway all the way to Araneta Avenue and possibly all the way to A. Bonifacio. So the possibility is there that the two road projects could actually proceed and be implemented together.
So for instance, the U.S. Agency for International Development is about to launch a project that helps to support PPPs and particularly infrastructure as part of the Partnership for Growth Initiative, which is the bilateral agreement between the U.S. government and the Philippine government. I'd be very interested to hear the private sector and government perspectives on what is the role of the donor community in helping to assist in the activities that are already being undertaken. Thank you.
Who would like to take it? Secretary?
We have been in discussions with the donor community in terms of providing direct financing to the private sector. I think JICA is precisely already looking at that. ADB also has opened up a private sector window. Now, I was just talking with the chairman of BDO, and I was asking her about what is the longest available tenor now from the private banks, and she's saying 15 years. And a little longer plus a grace period will definitely help the private sector, because in which case then doing private sector investment as against ODA, the transaction cost is definitely lower now, and you don't have to hire all the consultancies and so on and so forth. But the problem right now is if you were to finance a toll road on 15 years, then that will mean a slightly higher tariff than if you were to finance a toll road over
maybe 20 years plus a grace period during construction. So that's where the fund ODA or donor agencies can help that gap so that you will have a longer repayment period and a grace period during construction. Right now, the private sector lenders will definitely just look at payback. Okay? And so in the case of, one example is in the case of TPLEX, the Tarlac, Pangasinan, La Union, what they could justify to their lenders was only a 2-lane to start with. Okay? As compared to the Subic-Clark-Tarlac Toll Road, which is an ODA, we immediately constructed 4 lanes. So, because ODA was available, and that's a 40-year money, and so on and so forth. So, in which case, if the ODA agencies can provide some support to improve the repayment period, make it a little longer, then it will definitely help the infrastructure projects so that the toll and the tariff or users' fees will also be stretched out.
My final question, Ms. C, I guess I should be asking this of Ed Francisco, but I'm sure you must know. I think the 15-year that you're talking about, there's an Ayala bond being sold around now with a 15-year tenor. When do you think we will get to 20 and 25?
I guess it would be good for us to work or collaborate with the other funders who can go into longer years. For us, we have to address the commercial issue. But we can do it in such a way that there are certain, on the 15-year, we can structure in such a way that, after the 15-year, there's still some funds coming perhaps from the multilateral. We can work with the multilateral group and the donor funders, we'll be flexible in those areas.
Okay, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel this morning. Thank you very much.